Earth is a remarkable world, teeming with life in every corner. From the deepest oceans to the highest peaks, life thrives in astonishing forms. This is the epic story of flora and fauna, of plants, animals, and their incredible journey through time. The curtain rises on this magnificent spectacle. Let us begin our journey. Let us rewind the clock. Over 4 billion years. Earth was young, fiery and chaotic, bombarded by asteroids and shrouded in toxic haze. The oceans were hot and barren, the land empty and lifeless. A silent, rocky sphere hurtling through the darkness of space. Yet, within this harsh world, the ingredients for life gathered. Slowly, the stage was set for life's first act to begin. Deep beneath the primordial ocean, simple molecules organized into the first living cells, tiny microbes, ancestors of all life. For billions of years, these microbes ruled the oceans, slowly evolving. Some learned to harness sunlight, photosynthesis, releasing oxygen as waste. Oxygen transformed the world, paving the way for more complex life to emerge. The world was changing profoundly. Tiny cyanobacteria filled the air with oxygen, forming the ozone layer, a shield that made land habitable. Life leapt forward, complex cells, then multicellular organisms appeared. The oceans teemed with new life. Microbes had terraformed Earth, setting the stage for plants, animals, and a green-blue planet. "541 million years ago, life on Earth changed forever. In a burst of creativity called the Cambrian explosion, animal diversity exploded in the oceans. Hard shells, eyes, and new body plans appeared, transforming the seas into a vibrant, competitive world. This was life's Big Bang, establishing the blueprints for nearly all animals alive today. Amidst the Cambrian seas, a small, soft-bodied creature quietly debuted, the first chordate. With a notochord, a flexible rod along its back, it was the ancestor of all vertebrates. This simple innovation sparked a lineage that would one day dominate the planet, carrying the genetic blueprint for the backbone that shapes life today. While animals were diversifying, the seas saw their own revolution. The first large plant-like algae took hold in sunlit waters, creating the ocean's first forests and habitats. These algae produced oxygen, shaped the climate, and offered new opportunities for evolving animals. Their success paved the way for life's conquest of land. The Cambrian explosion sparked an underwater arms race. With the rise of predators like Anomalocaris, prey evolved shells, spines, and camouflage to survive. This back-and-forth struggle drove rapid evolution, creating remarkable creatures and new senses. The once peaceful seas became a battleground, dangerous but full of life's creativity. Trilobites were the quintessential animals of the Paleozoic era, thriving for nearly 300 million years. Their fossils, found on every continent, reveal their incredible diversity and adaptability. With complex eyes made of crystal, they pioneered the arthropod body plan. Though they vanished in the Great Permian extinction, their legacy endures in stone. After the Cambrian, the Ordovician period saw life flourish in warm, shallow seas. Gondwana dominated the southern hemisphere, while vast oceans teemed with trilobites, brachiopods, and giant nautiloids. Ancient reefs formed bustling marine cities. But this vibrant world would soon face Earth's first great extinction. 445 million years ago, Earth faced its first major mass extinction. A sudden ice age caused sea levels to plummet, destroying shallow seas and wiping out 85% of marine species. Yet from this devastation, life found a way to recover, adapt, and evolve, demonstrating its remarkable resilience. After the devastation of the late Ordovician extinction, the world began to heal. Melting ice flooded the continents, creating warm, shallow seas. Life rebounded, with new reefs and diverse marine creatures filling the oceans. Jawed fish emerged, transforming the balance of power. Sea scorpions ruled as giant predators. The stage was set for life's next great leap, the conquest of land. For billions of years, life thrived only in the oceans. But as microbes built a protective ozone layer, the stage was set for a revolution. The first plants ventured onto land, simple green pioneers that began to transform barren rock into fertile soil. Their arrival marked the beginning of the greening of the continents, paving the way for all future life on land. Before giants walked the land, tiny arthropods were the first pioneers. With sturdy exoskeletons and jointed legs, they conquered the new green world, breaking down plants and building soil. For millions of years, the land belonged to bugs, until vertebrates finally emerged from the water, ready for their own leap onto land. The Devonian, known as the Age of Fishes, saw an explosion of fish diversity in oceans, rivers, and lakes. Jawed fish like placoderms and the mighty Dunkleosteus ruled the waters, while sharks and bony fish emerged. In shallow swamps, lobe-finned fish developed fins and lungs, crucial steps toward life on land. While fish ruled the seas, plants on land evolved, growing tall and forming the first true forests. Lignan and true leaves let them reach new heights, capturing more sunlight. Ancient forests transformed the planet, creating deep shade, rich soils, and new habitats. Life on land flourished, setting the stage for the world we know today. In the Devonian's swampy forests, lobe-finned fish began the slow journey from water to land. Fossils like Tiktaalik reveal the transition, fins evolving into limbs, eyes atop flattened skulls. Early tetrapods like Acanthostega had limbs with digits but still lived in water. This leap opened a new world for vertebrates. The period following the Devonian, the Carboniferous, which began around 359 million years ago, was a world unlike any other. The global cooling initiated by the Devonian forests continued, but the climate in the vast tropical regions around the equator was warm, wet, and humid year-round. This created the perfect conditions for the new terrestrial ecosystems to flourish on an unprecedented scale. The continents were covered by immense steamy swamps and rainforests, dominated by colossal club moss trees that grew over 100 feet tall, and dense thickets of giant ferns and horsetails. It was a green, wet, and vibrant world, brimming with life. A key feature of the Carboniferous atmosphere was its incredibly high concentration of oxygen. The vast forests were pumping out oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis at a furious rate. At the same time, the unique conditions in the swamps meant that when these giant trees died, they often fell into stagnant, oxygen-poor water. This prevented them from decomposing completely. Instead, over millions of years, they were buried and compressed, forming the massive coal seams that give the Carboniferous period its name and power our modern world. With decomposition slowed, much of the carbon was buried, and oxygen levels in the atmosphere soared to as high as 35%, compared to our 21% today. This high oxygen atmosphere had a dramatic effect on life, particularly the arthropods. Because insects and other arthropods breathe through a system of tiny tubes called trachea, their size is limited by how efficiently oxygen can diffuse into their bodies. The super-oxygenated air of the Carboniferous supercharged this system, allowing them to grow to terrifying sizes. Millipedes, like Arthropleura, grew to be over 8 feet long, scuttling across the forest floor. In the skies, giant dragonflies like Meganeura, with wingspans of nearly 2.5 feet, hunted smaller insects. It was a world of creepy crawly giants, the golden age of bugs. This swampy, bug-filled world was also the perfect nursery for the early tetrapods. The amphibians, who had first ventured onto land in the Devonian, now thrived and diversified in these endless wetlands. They were the dominant land vertebrates of the time, perfectly adapted to a life split between the water and the land. The Carboniferous was their time to shine. They were the kings of the swamp, the top predators in a world that seemed custom-made for them. Life on land had truly hit its stride, creating a lush, green, and sometimes monstrous world under a high-octane sky. The Carboniferous period was the age of amphibians, rulers of vast, swampy landscapes. These diverse creatures thrived at the water's edge, but their soft skin and jelly-like eggs kept them tied to wet habitats. As the world began to dry, a new kind of egg would soon change everything, ending the reign of the amphibians. In the shadow of giant amphibians, small lizard-like reptiles evolved a game-changing secret, the amniotic egg. This tough-shelled egg let them lay young on dry land, far from water. For the first time, vertebrates could live their whole lives on land. As the world dried, reptiles thrived, ushering in the age of reptiles. The Permian period, beginning around 299 million years ago, was a time of extremes. On the grand stage of geology, all the Earth's major landmasses had drifted together to form a single, immense supercontinent known as Pangaea. This colossal landmass stretched from the South Pole to the North Pole, surrounded by a single, vast global ocean called Panthalassa. The formation of such a huge continent had a dramatic effect on the global climate. The vast interior of Pangaea was incredibly dry and arid, far from the moisture-bearing winds of the ocean. It was a world of immense deserts, seasonal monsoons, and great temperature fluctuations. The lush, wet swamps of the Carboniferous largely disappeared, replaced by more rugged and hardy vegetation. Conifers, plants that protect their seeds within cones, were particularly successful in this new, drier world. These were the ancestors of modern pines and firs, and they formed vast forests across the more temperate regions of Pangaea. Other seed-bearing plants, like ginkgos and cycads, also thrived. These new types of flora were better adapted to conserve water, allowing them to survive the harsh seasonal climates. The world was no longer uniformly green and swampy. It was a patchwork of deserts, scrublands, and conifer forests. In this new, challenging world, the reptiles and their relatives flourished. Having broken their ties to the water with the amniotic egg, they were free to colonize every corner of the vast supercontinent. The amphibians did not disappear entirely, but they were relegated to the shrinking river systems and coastal areas, the few places that remained consistently wet. The reptiles, however, underwent a massive adaptive radiation, diversifying into a wide variety of forms to take advantage of the new environments. They were the new masters of the land, the dominant terrestrial vertebrates of the Permian world. This period saw the evolution of the first large land herbivores, animals that could feed on the tough new conifer plants. It also saw the rise of the first large, powerful land predators to hunt them. For the first time, complex terrestrial ecosystems, with multiple levels of producers, herbivores, and carnivores, were established across the globe. Life on land had reached a new level of complexity and scale. The Permian was a world ruled by reptiles, a successful and diverse group that seemed destined to rule the Earth forever. But the greatest catastrophe in the history of life was looming on the horizon. During the Permian, the dominant group of land animals was not the ancestors of dinosaurs, but another branch of the reptile family tree known as the synapsids. We often call them mammal-like reptiles, which is a useful, if not perfectly accurate, description. They were reptiles, but they belonged to the specific lineage that would eventually, after many tens of millions of years, give rise to true mammals. The key feature that defines a synapsid is the single opening in the skull behind each eye socket, which served as an attachment point for powerful jaw muscles. This group was incredibly successful and dominated the Permian landscape. Early in the Permian, we see synapsids like the famous Dimetrodon. This was a formidable predator, often mistaken for a dinosaur with a mouthful of differentiated teeth, sharp canines and shearing teeth, and a spectacular sail on its back. The sail was a fan-like structure of skin supported by long spines growing from its vertebrae. Its exact function is still debated, but it was likely used for display to attract mates or intimidate rivals, or perhaps as a radiator to help control its body temperature, allowing it to warm up faster in the morning sun to get a jump on its prey. Dimetrodon was a top predator of its time, a sign of the synapsid's early success. Later in the Permian, the synapsids evolved into even more diverse and advanced forms. One group, the therapsids, became particularly prominent. These animals showed even more mammal-like characteristics. Their legs were positioned more directly underneath their bodies rather than sprawling out to the sides like a lizard's, allowing for more efficient and sustained movement. They included the first large herbivores, like the bulky mosscops, which roamed in herds across the plains of Pangaea. They also included fearsome predators like the Gorgonopsians, fast, saber-toothed hunters that were the lions and tigers of the Permian world. These synapsids were on a clear evolutionary trajectory towards becoming mammals. There is evidence that some of the later forms may have had fur and were possibly warm-blooded, able to regulate their own internal body temperature. This would have given them a huge advantage in the harsh, variable climate of Pangaea, allowing them to be active at night or in cooler temperatures. By the end of the Permian, the synapsids were at the height of their power, a diverse and sophisticated group of animals that ruled the supercontinent. They seemed to have the world at their feet, but they were about to be brought to the very brink of annihilation. At the very end of the Permian period, around 252 million years ago, life on Earth faced its darkest hour. The planet was convulsed by the most devastating mass extinction event in its entire history, an apocalypse known as the Permian-Triassic extinction, or the Great Dying. It was a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions, a perfect storm of environmental disasters that came perilously close to wiping out all life on the planet. Compared to this event, the extinction that killed the dinosaurs was, honestly, a minor incident. The Great Dying was the ultimate test of life's resilience, an event that would reset the course of evolution for all time. The primary cause of this cataclysm is believed to be a series of colossal volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia. These were not ordinary volcanoes. This was what we call a flood basalt event that lasted for hundreds of thousands of years, pouring out an immense volume of lava that covered an area larger than Western Europe. This incredible volcanic activity released staggering quantities of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, triggering runaway global warming. As temperatures soared, the oceans warmed and became acidic, and a deadly chain reaction of environmental collapse was set in motion. As the oceans heated up, they lost their ability to hold dissolved oxygen, creating vast, stagnant, anoxic dead zones. Bacteria that thrive in these low-oxygen conditions began to produce huge amounts of toxic hydrogen sulfide gas. This poisonous gas bubbled up out of the sea, killing marine life and then spreading into the atmosphere, killing plants and animals on land and likely damaging the protective ozone layer. The world, quite literally, was being poisoned from the ground up. Acid rain, caused by volcanic sulfur mixing with atmospheric moisture, would have scorched the forests, further devastating the terrestrial ecosystems. The toll on life was staggering. It is estimated that up to 96% of all marine species and 70% of all terrestrial vertebrate species were wiped out. The oceans fell silent. The trilobites, which had survived for 300 million years, were gone forever. The great reefs vanished. On land, the dominant synapsids were decimated. The giant Gorgonopsian predators and the great herds of herbivores disappeared. The forests were ravaged. Life on Earth was brought to its knees. The planet became a desolate, poisoned wasteland. It would take millions of years for life to recover from this near-total reset. In the aftermath of the Great Dying, the world was a strange and empty place. The vibrant, complex ecosystems of the Permian had been shattered. The Triassic period, which began in the wake of the extinction, was a time of recovery and rebuilding. For the first few million years, the planet was a disaster world, dominated by just a few hardy, opportunistic species that had managed to survive the catastrophe. On land, the most successful survivor was a pig-sized, burrowing synapsid herbivore called Lystrosaurus. Fossils of this one creature make up 90% of all land vertebrates in some early Triassic fossil beds, a sign of just how empty the world had become. The climate of the Triassic was generally hot and dry, with the vast supercontinent of Pangaea still intact. The recovery was slow, a painful process of rebuilding biodiversity from the few surviving lineages. The synapsids, the mammal-like reptiles that had ruled the Permian, had been hit incredibly hard. While some, like Lystrosaurus, survived and even thrived for a time, their dynasty was broken. This ecological vacuum created a massive opportunity. With the dominant synapsids gone, other groups of reptiles now had a chance to radiate and diversify, competing to become the new masters of this recovering world. One group of reptiles in particular seized this opportunity with great success, the archosaurs, or ruling reptiles. This group included the ancestors of crocodiles, as well as a new and dynamic lineage that was just beginning its journey. These were the dinosaurs. In the early and middle Triassic, the world was not yet a dinosaur-dominated place. Instead, it was ruled by a variety of large archosaurs, including fearsome crocodile-like predators called rauisuchians, which were the top carnivores on land. The survivors of the synapsid lineage, our own distant ancestors, were mostly small, shrew-like creatures, living in the shadows of these new reptilian giants. Slowly, over millions of years, the world's ecosystems began to recover their complexity. The forests of conifers, cycads, and ferns regrew. New types of corals appeared in the oceans, building the first modern-style reefs. Life was returning, but it was a different cast of characters playing on the stage. The Great Dying had been a profound filter, wiping out the old rulers and clearing the way for new ones. The Triassic was a transitional period, a strange new world rising from the ashes of the old, setting the stage for the most famous and spectacular era in the history of animal life: the Age of Dinosaurs. The dinosaurs did not burst onto the scene as giant world-conquering titans. Their beginnings in the middle of the Triassic period, around 240 million years ago, were remarkably humble. The first dinosaurs were small, bipedal animals, no bigger than a dog or a turkey. They were just one of many reptile groups competing for a place in the new Triassic ecosystems. Creatures like Eoraptor and Herrerasaurus from South America were swift, agile predators, likely hunting small reptiles and the insect-eating synapsids that were, well, our own ancestors. They were fast and lightly built, a key advantage that set them apart. What made a dinosaur a dinosaur? They possessed a few key anatomical features that gave them a competitive edge. The most important was their posture. Unlike other reptiles whose legs sprawled out to the side, dinosaurs had an erect stance, with their legs positioned directly beneath their bodies. This was thanks to a hip socket that was a hole, not just a cup, and a femur or thigh bone that was angled to fit into it. This pillar-erect stance supported their weight more efficiently and allowed for much more effective and sustained running and walking. It was honestly the blueprint for an active lifestyle and, eventually, for supporting immense size. For much of the Triassic, the dinosaurs remained minor players. They were overshadowed by the larger and more dominant archosaurs, like the heavily built crocodile-line etosaurs and the fearsome Rauisuchian predators. The dinosaurs were the underdogs, evolving in the margins. They slowly diversified into the two great lineages that would define their reign: the Saurischia, or lizard-hipped dinosaurs, which included the two-legged carnivorous theropods and the long-necked herbivorous sauropodomorphs, and the Ornithischia, or bird-hipped dinosaurs, which would later include famous herbivores like Stegosaurus, Triceratops, and the duck-billed dinosaurs. Towards the end of the Triassic, around 201 million years ago, another less severe mass extinction event struck the planet, likely caused by volcanic activity associated with the initial breakup of the supercontinent Pangaea. This event wiped out many of the dinosaurs' main competitors, including most of the large amphibians and the dominant Rauisuchian predators. The dinosaurs, for reasons we still don't fully understand, were less affected. Perhaps their efficient locomotion and possible higher metabolism gave them an edge. With their rivals suddenly gone, the world was wide open. The humble beginnings were over. The dinosaurs were now poised to inherit the Earth. In the Triassic, reptiles conquered land, sea, and sky. Archosaurs and dinosaurs ruled the land, while ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs dominated the oceans. Above, pterosaurs became the first vertebrates to master flight, long before birds. The age of reptiles had truly begun, shaping the world for millions of years. The extinction event at the end of the Triassic was, honestly, a turning point. It cleared the board of the dinosaurs' main competitors, leaving a world of opportunity in its wake. As the Jurassic period dawned, around 201 million years ago, the supercontinent of Pangaea was beginning to break apart. The climate became warmer and wetter, and the vast deserts of the Triassic were replaced by lush forests of ferns, cycads, and conifers. This new, more productive environment, combined with the lack of competition, created the perfect conditions for the dinosaurs to finally step out of the shadows and into the spotlight. The age of dinosaurs had truly begun. The two main lineages of dinosaurs exploded in diversity and most famously in size. Among the Saurischia, the theropods, the two-legged carnivores, produced formidable predators like Dilophosaurus, famous for its pair of head crests. But the most dramatic development was among the sauropodomorphs. These long-necked herbivores began to grow to stupendous sizes. Early Jurassic giants like Volcanodon and Barapasaurus were the precursors to the even more colossal sauropods that would dominate the late Jurassic. Their immense size was likely a defense against predators and allowed them to browse on high treetops that no other animal could reach. The other great dinosaur group, the Ornithischians, or bird-hipped dinosaurs, also began their rise. These were all herbivores, and they evolved a variety of strategies for feeding and defense. In the early Jurassic, they were represented by small bipedal plant eaters and the first armored dinosaurs. This included creatures like Solidosaurus, a four-legged herbivore covered in bony scutes and plates, a forerunner of the much more famous Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus that would appear later. These animals were evolving new ways to process tough plant material, including the development of beaks and complex batteries of grinding teeth. The world had been transformed. The small, scurrying creatures of the early Triassic had given way to a world of giants. The sounds of the forest were now the heavy footfalls of sauropods and the calls of new, larger dinosaurs. Our own synapsid ancestors, the first true mammals, were still present, but they were tiny, shrew-like creatures, living nocturnal lives in the undergrowth, trying to stay out of the way of the new rulers of the world. For the next 135 million years, through the Jurassic and the Cretaceous periods that followed, the Earth would be the planet of the dinosaurs. The Cretaceous period began around 145 million years ago, marking dramatic changes on Earth. Continents drifted apart, new oceans formed, and warm climates fostered lush forests and diverse dinosaurs. Unique species evolved on isolated landmasses, setting the stage for the planet's most famous extinction event. For millions of years, Earth's forests were green and brown. Conifers, ferns, and cycads ruled. Then, flowers appeared. Angiosperms brought color, scent, and a new way to reproduce, using animals as pollinators. Suddenly, landscapes exploded with reds, yellows, and blues. The world was transformed, forever more vibrant, diverse, and alive. The evolution of the flower was not a solo performance. It was actually the beginning of a beautiful and intricate dance with the animal kingdom. The flowers needed animals to carry their pollen, and the animals discovered a rich and reliable new food source in nectar and sometimes the pollen itself. This led to the process of coevolution, where two or more species reciprocally affect each other's evolution. As flowers evolved, so did their pollinators. And as pollinators evolved, they drove the evolution of flowers in new directions. This partnership created some of the most complex and fascinating relationships in the natural world. A story that, honestly, continues to this day. The first pollinators were likely beetles, which were already abundant in the Cretaceous forests. They would have clambered over the early bowl-shaped flowers, munching on pollen, and in the process, transferring some from plant to plant. But as flowering plants diversified, they began to attract more specialized partners. The insects in particular radiated alongside the angiosperms. The ancestors of modern bees, wasps, and butterflies appeared during this time. These insects were far more efficient pollinators than beetles. They could fly directly from flower to flower, and they evolved specialized mouthparts, like the long proboscis of a butterfly, to access nectar from deep within a flower's structure. This partnership became an evolutionary feedback loop. Flowers evolved specific colors, patterns, and scents to attract specific pollinators. Flowers that attracted bees, for example, were often blue or yellow, colors that bees can see well. Flowers that relied on moths, which fly at night, were often pale white and produced strong scents after dusk. Some flowers developed intricate shapes, like tubes or funnels, that would only allow an insect with a perfectly matched tongue length to access the nectar. This ensured that the pollinator would be a faithful visitor, not wasting the flower's precious pollen by visiting other species. This emerging web of interactions made ecosystems more resilient and more complex. The success of the flowering plants provided a new, energy-rich base for the food chain that simply wasn't there before. The insects that fed on them flourished, providing more food for the lizards, amphibians, small mammals, and birds that preyed upon them. The rise of flowers was not just a botanical event, it was a revolution that rippled through the entire animal kingdom. The world became a busier, more interconnected, and more colorful place, all thanks to this brilliant evolutionary pact between plants and their animal partners. While dinosaurs ruled the land, the Cretaceous oceans were transformed by rising seas, creating the vast western interior seaway. This lost ocean teemed with giant predators, mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and massive turtles like archelon. Mosasaurs, with flexible jaws, ruled these waters. It was a dangerous, vibrant world, an ancient sea now vanished, but its fossils reveal its wonders. The Cretaceous period was the height of dinosaur evolution, ruled by the mighty theropods. From the iconic T-Rex to the giant Giganotosaurus and the swift, feathered raptors, these predators dominated every continent. Their power, intelligence, and diversity shaped entire ecosystems, making life as a herbivore a truly dangerous existence. To support a world of giant predators, well, there had to be an even greater world of giant prey. The Cretaceous period was home to the most diverse and heavily armed herbivorous dinosaurs that ever lived. These plant eaters evolved a spectacular array of defenses to protect themselves from the relentless pressure of the theropods. They grew to enormous sizes, developed formidable weapons, and in many cases, covered their bodies in thick armor. Many of these herbivores also adopted a new social behavior, living in large herds. This offered protection through numbers, with many eyes and ears always on the lookout for danger, a classic strategy of safety in numbers. In North America and Asia, the most common large herbivores were the hadrosaurs, or duck-billed dinosaurs. These were incredibly successful animals, often called the cows of the Cretaceous. They had broad, toothless beaks for cropping vegetation, and further back in their jaws, hundreds of tightly packed teeth that formed a grinding surface for chewing tough plant material. Many hadrosaurs, like Parasaurolophus, possessed bizarre and elaborate crests on their heads. These crests were hollow and connected to their nasal passages, and were likely used to produce loud, resonant calls to communicate with others in the herd. A real symphony of the Cretaceous plains, if you can imagine it. Alongside the hadrosaurs were the ceratopsians, the horned dinosaurs. The most famous of these is Triceratops, a 10-ton behemoth with a massive bony frill protecting its neck and 3 formidable horns on its face. The horns were clearly defensive weapons, and fossils of T-Rex, with healed puncture wounds that matched Triceratops' horns, prove that they were used in battle. The frill may have also been used for display, a vibrant billboard, you might say, to attract mates or establish dominance within the herd. These animals were like living fortresses, well equipped to stand their ground against even the largest predators. Another group, the ankylosaurs, took a different approach to defense. They were, in essence, the tanks of the dinosaur world. Low-slung and massively built, they were covered from head to tail in thick, bony plates and spikes, making them almost impossible to attack from above. The most advanced ankylosaurs, like Ankylosaurus itself, had another weapon, a huge bony club at the end of their tail. A swing from this powerful club could easily shatter the leg bones of an attacking T-Rex. The constant evolutionary arms race between these well-defended herbivores and their fearsome predators created some of the most spectacular and awe-inspiring creatures in our planet's history. In the Cretaceous skies, pterosaurs soared as true masters, some as large as airplanes, others flitting like birds. But they weren't alone. The first birds, evolved from feathered dinosaurs, joined them, each group ruling different parts of the sky. As time passed, birds flourished, and the age of pterosaurs faded. While the dinosaurs thundered across the land and pterosaurs ruled the skies, another group of vertebrates was quietly going about its business in the shadows. These were our own ancestors, the mammals. Having evolved from the synapsid lineage in the late Triassic, mammals had spent their entire existence living in a world dominated by giant reptiles. For over 150 million years, they were relegated to the margins of the ecosystem, surviving by being small, secretive, and smart. The age of dinosaurs was also, in its own way, a long and crucial chapter in the story of mammals. Cretaceous mammals were, for the most part, tiny creatures. Most were no bigger than a mouse or a rat. To avoid the attention of the dinosaurs, which were mostly active during the day, the vast majority of mammals were nocturnal. They were creatures of the night and the undergrowth, scurrying through the leaf litter, hiding in burrows or climbing in the trees. This lifestyle drove the evolution of key mammalian traits. They developed excellent senses of hearing and smell to navigate and find food in the dark. Their brains were relatively large for their body size, giving them the cleverness needed to outwit their giant reptilian neighbors. There was a surprising diversity of these early mammals. There were insect eaters, small herbivores, and even some that were specialized for swimming or gliding. One remarkable fossil from China, a creature called Repenomamus, was a badger-sized mammal found with the remains of a baby dinosaur in its stomach. This shows that while most mammals were small, some were large enough to prey on young dinosaurs, turning the tables on their colossal rulers. But these were the exceptions. The general rule for mammals was to stay small and stay out of the way. Crucially, mammals were warm-blooded and covered in fur, which helped them regulate their body temperature and stay active in the cool of the night, and they had perfected a new reproductive strategy, caring for their young. Most gave birth to live young and fed them with milk, a highly nutritious food source that gave their offspring a great start in life. These adaptations, intelligence, keen senses, warm-bloodedness, and parental care, were being honed and perfected over millions of years in the shadows. They were the survival toolkit that would one day allow mammals to inherit the Earth when the age of giant reptiles came to a sudden, violent end. The story of life is always set against the backdrop of a changing planet, and the Cretaceous period was no exception. The slow, inexorable dance of plate tectonics was reshaping the globe. The breakup of Pangaea, which had begun in the Jurassic, accelerated dramatically. South America and Africa split apart, creating the South Atlantic Ocean. India broke away from Antarctica and began its long, lonely journey north towards Asia. This continental drift had massive consequences for life. It isolated populations, leading to the evolution of unique species on each landmass, and it changed the circulation patterns of the oceans and the atmosphere, driving climate change. In the late Cretaceous, the world experienced a period of intense geological activity. The same forces that were pulling the continents apart were also pushing them together elsewhere. The collision of tectonic plates created massive mountain ranges. The Laramide orogeny, for instance, began to build the Rocky Mountains in North America. This mountain building was accompanied by widespread and sustained volcanic activity. The Deccan Traps in what is now India began to form, a colossal flood basalt event similar to the one that caused the Permian extinction, spewing dust, sulfur, and greenhouse gases into the atmosphere for thousands of years. This geological turmoil began to place the world's ecosystems under stress. The massive volcanic eruptions would have caused bouts of acid rain and periods of global warming and cooling, making the environment less stable. The high sea levels that had characterized most of the Cretaceous began to fall, draining the shallow inland seas and dramatically altering coastlines and habitats. The world that had been a relatively stable, warm greenhouse for tens of millions of years was becoming a more unpredictable and challenging place to live. Life had always adapted to change, but it was being primed for a shock. Even before the final catastrophe, there are signs in the fossil record that some groups of dinosaurs were in decline. The incredible diversity of the mid-Cretaceous seems to have waned in the last few million years of the period. Perhaps the environmental stress from volcanism and changing sea levels was already taking its toll. The intricate web of life, from the flowering plants to the giant dinosaurs, was being stretched and weakened. The planet was in a state of flux, a world on the edge. It was a world that was dangerously vulnerable to the ultimate global disaster, a threat that would arrive not from within the Earth, but from the depths of outer space. "66 million years ago, the long reign of the dinosaurs came to an end on a single terrible day. On that day, an asteroid or comet, estimated to be at least 6 miles wide, slammed into the Earth. It was traveling at an incredible speed, many times faster than a rifle bullet. It struck a shallow sea off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula in modern-day Mexico, unleashing energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs. This was the Chicxulub impact, an event that triggered a global catastrophe on a scale that life had not experienced for almost 200 million years. The world changed in a matter of minutes. The immediate effects of the impact were apocalyptic. The asteroid vaporized on impact, blasting a crater over 100 miles wide and 20 miles deep into the Earth's crust. It sent a titanic shockwave and a blast of superheated air expanding outwards for hundreds of miles, incinerating everything in its path. The impact triggered colossal earthquakes, more powerful than any ever recorded by humans, and generated mega tsunamis, waves thousands of feet high that raced across the oceans, devastating coastal regions around the globe. Any creature within 1,000 miles of the impact site would have been killed almost instantly. But the true global killers were the secondary effects. The impact ejected trillions of tons of pulverized rock and molten debris high above the atmosphere. As this material fell back to Earth, the friction of its re-entry heated the upper atmosphere to oven-like temperatures. the sky would have glowed red-hot across the entire planet. This intense pulse of heat would have cooked any unprotected animal on the surface and ignited widespread global wildfires. The world was literally set on fire. The dinosaurs that survived the initial blast, the tsunamis and the earthquakes, now faced a planet-wide inferno. For those creatures that could shelter underground or underwater, the ordeal was far from over. The immense quantities of fine dust and soot from the impact and the global fires were thrown into the stratosphere, where they would remain for years. This thick blanket of dust enshrouded the planet in darkness, blocking out the light of the sun. The great impact was over in a day, but it plunged the Earth into a long, dark and freezing nuclear winter. The stage was set for a mass extinction that would wipe out 3/4 of all species on Earth and bring the age of reptiles to a sudden, dramatic and fiery close. The darkness that fell upon the Earth after the Chicxulub impact was the final, decisive blow. With the sun's light blocked by a thick shroud of dust and soot, photosynthesis on a global scale ground to a halt. The plants, the very foundation of most ecosystems, began to die. In the oceans, the microscopic phytoplankton that formed the base of the marine food web perished. This collapse of the producers triggered a chain reaction of extinction that ripped through the entire food chain. The herbivores that fed on the plants starved first, and then the carnivores that fed on the herbivores quickly followed. The dinosaurs, the magnificent rulers of the Cretaceous world, stood no chance. Their very size, once their greatest asset, now became their fatal weakness. A large animal needs a huge amount of food to survive, and in a world without plants, there was simply nothing for the giant herbivores like Triceratops and the hadrosaurs to eat. As they died off, the giant predators like Tyrannosaurus rex, deprived of their prey, also starved into extinction. In the oceans, the great mosasaurs and plesiosaurs vanished, their food web collapsing from the bottom up. The pterosaurs, the masters of the sky, also disappeared forever. The world of giants was gone. But you know, life is tenacious. Not everything died. The survivors of this long winter were, for the most part, the small and the adaptable. Small animals need less food and can reproduce more quickly. Creatures that were generalists, able to eat a wide variety of things, fared better than specialists. The key to survival was often the ability to find shelter from the initial heat blast and then to live off the world's decaying leftovers. Animals that lived in burrows or in freshwater rivers and lakes, where ecosystems are based more on detritus, decaying organic matter, had a significant advantage. This is why our mammalian ancestors survived. These small, shrew-like creatures were used to living in burrows and feeding on insects and worms, a food source that could persist in the rotting leaf litter. The birds also survived, but not all of them. The toothed primitive birds of the Cretaceous died out. The survivors were the ancestors of modern birds, likely small, ground-dwelling creatures with beaks that could eat seeds, which could lie dormant in the soil for years. Alongside them, crocodiles, turtles, lizards and amphibians, all able to shelter in water or underground, weathered the storm. The world was cleared of its titans, leaving a strange and empty stage for these humble survivors. The first epoch after the Great Extinction is called the Paleocene. It was a strange and quiet world, an eerie echo of what had come before. The immense forests of the Cretaceous had been destroyed, first by fire and then by the lack of sunlight. The immediate aftermath was a planet dominated by fungi, which thrived on the vast amounts of rotting wood. Then, as the dust slowly settled and sunlight returned, the first plants to recover were the ferns. For thousands of years, vast fern spikes covered the continents, a sign of a recovering but deeply damaged ecosystem. The world was slowly, painfully beginning to heal. The survivors of the extinction now found themselves in a world of immense opportunity. The dinosaurs were gone. The giant marine reptiles were gone. The pterosaurs were gone. All the dominant roles in the global ecosystem were suddenly vacant. The world belonged to the small and the meek who had inherited it. The first few million years of the Paleocene were a time of ecological experimentation. The surviving groups, particularly the mammals and the birds, began to radiate out from their refuges, trying out new lifestyles and exploring the ecological space that had been so abruptly cleared for them. In the beginning, the world's new rulers were not the mammals, but the birds. Having survived the extinction, some bird lineages evolved into large, flightless predators. These terror birds, with their powerful legs and massive, hooked beaks, became the apex predators in many parts of the world, taking over the role once held by the theropod dinosaurs. Meanwhile, in the oceans, the sharks, which had survived the extinction better than many other groups, became the dominant predators in the absence of the mosasaurs. The world was being repopulated, but the cast of characters was entirely new and still in flux. The mammals, however, held the greatest potential. Freed from the constraints of living in a dinosaur's world, they began to diversify rapidly. In the Paleocene, they were still relatively small and generalized. There were no giant mammals yet. Most were no bigger than a modern cat or a small dog. But they were experimenting with new diets and new ways of life. Some were becoming dedicated herbivores, others carnivores. Some were returning to the trees, while others remained on the ground. The pieces were being put in place for a new dynasty. The long age of reptiles had ended, and the age of mammals was about to begin. The recovery from the extinction event accelerated as the world moved from the Paleocene into the Eocene epoch, beginning around 56 million years ago. The global climate warmed significantly, and the temporary fern world gave way to lush, tropical and subtropical forests that stretched from pole to pole. This warm, productive and dinosaur-free world was the perfect crucible for the evolution of mammals. They exploded in diversity in an event known as the Eocene radiation, diversifying into the ancestors of all the major mammal groups we know today. It was, you might say, the mammalian equivalent of the Cambrian explosion. For the first time since their evolution, mammals began to grow large. With no dinosaurs to keep them in check, the path was clear to evolve larger bodies. The first large mammalian herbivores appeared, like the Uintatheres, strange rhino-sized creatures with knobby heads and saber-like tusks. The first large mammalian predators evolved to hunt them, like the fearsome wolf-like mesonychids. For the first time, the forests echoed with the sounds of large mammals, rather than giant reptiles. The roles once played by hadrosaurs and tyrannosaurs were now being filled by a new cast of furry, warm-blooded actors. Mammals conquered not only the land, but also the seas and the air. One group of land-dwelling mammals, related to modern hippos, began to spend more and more time in the water. Over millions of years, they evolved into the first whales, adapting completely to an aquatic life and eventually becoming the largest animals ever to live on our planet. Another group of mammals, likely insect eaters that leapt among the trees, evolved wings of skin stretched between elongated fingers, becoming the first bats and conquering the night skies, a niche the birds had not fully exploited. This was the dawn of our own age, the Cenozoic era, the era of new life. The humble, shrew-like creatures that had spent 150 million years scurrying in the shadows of the dinosaurs had now inherited the Earth. They had survived the greatest of cataclysms and had seized the opportunity it presented with spectacular success. Their key adaptations, warm-bloodedness, fur, parental care, and intelligence, proved to be a winning formula in this new world. The dynasty of the dinosaurs was over, and the stage was now set for the incredible rise of the mammals. A story that would eventually, after many more millions of years, lead to the evolution of our own species. The age of mammals saw incredible diversity and giants like Paraceratherium, the largest land mammal ever. Mammals adapted to every habitat, from forests to plains, and new predators evolved alongside them. In Africa's lush forests, primates began a journey that would one day lead to us. Around 25 million years ago, a cooling climate transformed vast forests into open grasslands. Grasses, adapted to dry conditions and grazing, spread rapidly. Herds of grazing animals evolved speed and specialized teeth to survive. Predators adapted too, favoring endurance and teamwork. These grasslands shaped the evolution of iconic mammals, including our own ancestors. Our own story begins not on the open savanna, but deep within the warm, dense forests of the age of mammals. The primates, the order of mammals that includes lemurs, monkeys, apes, and humans, got their start as small, tree-dwelling creatures. Their earliest ancestors were likely similar to modern tree shrews, small insect eaters that scurried through the lower branches. Living in the trees, or an arboreal environment, required a specific set of skills. It favored agility, good eyesight, and an ability to grasp branches securely. These early adaptations would, by a long and winding evolutionary path, lay the foundation for the human mind. Life in the trees demanded a three-dimensional understanding of the world. Leaping from branch to branch required excellent depth perception. This drove the evolution of forward-facing eyes, giving primates stereoscopic vision, a critical trait for judging distances accurately. It also required a brain that could process this complex visual information and coordinate precise movements. To grip branches securely, primates evolved hands and feet with long grasping digits and sensitive fingertips. In place of sharp claws, most developed flat nails, which allowed for a more delicate and precise sense of touch, perfect for manipulating food and navigating their complex, leafy world. Around 25 million years ago in Africa, a new group of primates appeared, the apes. These were distinct from the monkeys. They tended to be larger, and most importantly, they had no tail. They developed a new way of moving through the trees, using their long, powerful arms to swing and dangle, a form of locomotion called brachiation. This required a more upright posture, a very flexible shoulder joint, and a larger, more complex brain to coordinate these movements. These early apes, like the famous proconsul, were a successful and diverse group that spread from Africa into Asia and Europe during the warmer climate of the Miocene. These ape ancestors were a varied group. Some were small, others were the size of a modern gorilla. They were mostly fruit eaters, and their intelligence, driven by the demands of life in the trees and complex social interactions, continued to grow. They were learning, remembering the location of fruit trees and navigating the intricate social politics of their groups. It was within this lineage of intelligent, big-brained, upright apes that the seeds of humanity were planted. The unique combination of grasping hands, three-dimensional vision, and a brain built for complex problem-solving was the legacy we inherited from our arboreal past. Our story begins in Africa, as forests shrank and savannas spread. Some apes adapted, venturing onto open ground. They took a monumental step, walking upright on two legs. This bipedalism defines hominins, our own lineage. On the ancient African plains, the journey toward humanity had begun. The leap from anatomy to technology began with stone tools, marking the dawn of the Stone Age. Early humans used sharp stones to cut meat and crack bones, fueling bigger brains. Mastery of fire brought warmth, safety, and cooked food, strengthening social bonds. With tools and fire, our ancestors spread across continents, becoming true pioneers. Homo erectus first left Africa, but it was Homo sapiens, emerging around 300,000 years ago, who would ultimately reshape the world. As modern humans spread, they encountered and interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, but within a few thousand years, only Homo sapiens remained, a single human species on a truly human planet. During the Ice Age, our ancestors thrived among mammoths, giant elk, and dire wolves, mastering their environment with advanced tools and cooperation. This era saw the birth of art and symbolic thought, as humans painted, sculpted, and began to see the world as more than just a place to survive. As the Ice Age ended, Humans adapted to new environments, inventing agriculture and domesticating animals, transforming landscapes and building the first villages. This Neolithic revolution brought stability and growth, but also new challenges, setting humanity on the path to civilization. Agriculture led to cities, civilizations, and eventually the Industrial Revolution, making humans the dominant force shaping the planet. Our impact is now so profound that scientists call this era the Anthropocene, the age of humans. Our rise has driven a mass extinction, unraveling ecosystems and threatening our own future. Yet, our knowledge and ingenuity give us the power to restore and protect the web of life, if we choose to become wise stewards of Earth. From the first microbes to the rise of humanity, life's story is one of survival, innovation, and connection. Our journey is both a tale of triumph and a call to responsibility, to ensure the epic of life continues for generations to come. We are not separate from the ancient past, but living proof of it. The oxygen we breathe, the structure of our bodies, and the DNA within us all tell a story billions of years old. Every living thing is a fellow traveler in time, sharing this legacy. Understanding this connection transforms our view of nature, reminding us we are one branch on the ancient tree of life, with a responsibility to protect it. The story of life is one of change and crisis. Today we face the sixth great extinction, this time caused by us. Our success has made us the planet's greatest driver of change. The perils are clear, but so is the promise. We can choose a different path, one of creativity, compassion, and hope. The future is in our hands. The story of life on Earth is still being written. Hope is an active choice, visible in those who protect, restore, and cherish our planet. We can all become stewards, shaping a future where nature and humanity thrive together. Let us write a chapter of healing, so the adventure of life on Earth continues to